1910, a busy train station. A bag filled with 370 pounds in cash, worth millions today. And a cashier, for whom this was just an ordinary Friday. But this Friday was anything but ordinary. 30 seconds. It took just 30 seconds to murder a trusted employee and make those files and money vanish. How did this happen inside a locked compartment of a moving train? This isn't just a story of a murder. This is the story of Britain's most controversial railway execution. A case where the hard evidence remains a massive question mark to this very day. Was an innocent man sent to the gallows? Let's dive deep into the Newcastle Railway mystery.
In the early 20th century, the city of Newcastle, England, was a booming hub of industry, commerce, and coal mining. Among the thousands of hard-working individuals who kept this massive industrial machine running smoothly was a man named John Innes Nisbet. Born in Newcastle in 1864, John was a man of quiet dedication, exceptional character, and immense reliability. After finishing his formal education in the year 1882, he sought out employment and joined the Stobswood Colliery Company, where he was initially given the humble position of a clerk. John proved himself to be a highly capable and trustworthy employee from his very first day on the job. He was a man who took great pride in his work, steadily rising through the ranks of the business over the next decade. His personal life was just as stable and fulfilling as his professional life. In 1892, John married a wonderful young lady named Cicely Elizabeth, and together they began building a quiet, respected life. The following year, in 1893, their first daughter was born, bringing immense joy to the household. And in 1897, a second daughter arrived to complete their small family. By the turn of the century, the Nisbet family had moved to a comfortable home located at 180 Heaton Road, situated in Heaton, which was one of Newcastle's rapidly growing eastern suburbs. Throughout his long and distinguished career, John Nisbet earned a legendary reputation for absolute honesty, precision, and diligence. By the year 1910, he had spent a staggering 28 years in the continuous employment of the Stobswood Colliery Company. Because of his unblemished record and absolute trustworthiness, he had risen to the highly responsible position of company cashier. It was a role that carried considerable financial responsibility and risk. Every alternate Friday, which was the official payday for the colliery workers, John would make a regular journey into the heart of Newcastle to obtain the wages money directly from Lloyd's Bank. After withdrawing the massive sum of cash, his routine was to carry it securely inside a small, locked leather bag to Newcastle Central Station, where he would board a train to transport the money for direct payment to the hundreds of miners employed at the colliery. Newcastle Central Station was a magnificent architectural marvel of its time, designed by the renowned architect John Dobson and the famous engineer Robert Stephenson. It was built as a single, grand station to unite the various complex railroad lines serving the industrial city. By 1910, the station handled thousands of passengers every single day, serving as a vital gateway for both commercial progress and heavy industrial traffic. On any given morning, businessmen, commercial travelers, colliery officials, and everyday miners regularly passed through its bustling, crowded platforms. For companies like the Stobswood Colliery Company, this historic station formed an essential, irreplaceable link in the movement of miners' wages and other critical business transactions throughout the entire region. Friday, the 18th of March, 1910, began like any other ordinary payday. John Nisbet left his home on Heaton Road and started his regular journey into Newcastle. He arrived at Lloyd's Bank, where he successfully withdrew the sum of £370 and 9 shillings. This was an enormous fortune at the time, equivalent to tens of thousands of pounds in today's money, meant to pay the wages of hundreds of coal miners. John carefully placed the entire sum of cash inside his small, locked leather bag, ensuring it was secure. Following this, he walked through the crisp morning air and made his way directly to Newcastle Central Station. His objective was to catch the 10:27 a.m. train bound for Allenmouth, intending to get off at a smaller station called Widdrington, where the colliery officials would be waiting to receive him. Payday always brought an extra wave of heavy activity and tension to the busy station platforms.
Other colliery cashiers from competing coal companies would make almost identical journeys on the very same morning, carrying large bags of money for miners scattered across Northumberland. Among the crowded platforms that morning were Percival Harding Hall and John William Spink, two trusted employees who worked for the Netherton Coal Company. As the passengers began to board the 10:27 a.m. train, Mr. Hall noticed John Nisbet walking purposefully along the platform. What caught his attention was that John was not alone. He was walking and talking amiably with another man. The pair appeared to be searching the train cars for a specific smoking compartment near the very front of the train. Mr. Hall distinctly heard John Nisbet say aloud, "We will make this one a smoker." Right after saying this, the two men entered the train compartment together and closed the door. Shortly after the train's scheduled departure from Central Station, it made its first brief stop at Heaton Station. It was a long-standing custom for John's wife, Cicely Elizabeth Nisbet, to meet her husband on the platform as his train passed through her neighborhood. On this particular Friday morning, she was once again waiting faithfully for him on the platform. To her immediate surprise, however, she discovered that her husband was seated in a compartment near the very front of the train. This struck her as quite strange and unusual because John was a creature of habit, and he almost always chose a compartment located at the back or the middle of the train for his weekly journeys. When she spotted him through the glass, she smiled and waved. John noticed his wife, lowered the heavy window of the carriage, and the two were able to speak briefly to each other over the noise of the idling steam engine. Mrs. Nisbet gently reminded her husband not to be late coming home that evening because her aunt was coming to visit their house for dinner. John laughed warmly, reassured his wife, and promised her that he intended to return directly home the very moment his work at the colliery was finished. As the train whistle blew and the carriages began to slowly move away from the platform, Mrs. Nisbet caught a brief, partial glimpse of the mysterious passenger seated directly opposite her husband. The train compartment stood partly in the deep shadow of a dark railway tunnel, which made detailed observations extremely difficult. But she could clearly see that the man wore a distinctive, light-colored overcoat with a turned-up collar. The train gained speed, moving north through the English countryside. At exactly 11:06 a.m., the train arrived at Stannington Station, where the two Netherton Coal Company employees, Mr. Hall and Mr. Spink, were scheduled to get off. They stepped out onto the concrete platform, and as they walked past the front carriages, they both glanced casually into the compartment window where John Nisbet was sitting. They saw that the cashier was still seated comfortably, facing the direction of the engine, while talking calmly to the exact same man who was sitting directly opposite him. The train soon departed Stannington, and exactly 6 minutes later, it arrived at the next stop, which was Morpeth Station. At Morpeth, a passenger wearing a loose, light overcoat stepped off the train onto the platform and walked directly toward the busy ticket collector named John Addy. The man calmly explained to the collector that his ticket was only valid as far as Stannington Station, but he had been so deeply distracted that he had completely forgotten to get off the train at his proper stop. The brief conversation between the two was entirely polite and cordial. The man then paid the required excess fare to the collector, stepped through the station gates, and quickly left the premises. At that exact same moment, another passenger named John Grant boarded the train at Morpeth. Because he did not want to sit in a quiet compartment all by himself, he walked slowly down the outside platform, looking through the windows to find a carriage that already had other passengers inside. As he walked past the exact compartment where John Nisbet had been sitting just moments before, he noticed something strange. The entire compartment appeared to be completely empty. The train continued its journey further north. It passed through the minor stops of Pegwood and Longhurst, where no passengers departed from the front carriages, and then the train finally arrived at Widdrington Station. This was the exact destination where John Nisbet was supposed to step off the train and meet a waiting representative from the Stobswood Colliery Company to deliver the thousands of miners' wages. However, when the train ground to a halt, John Nisbet did not get off. The worried colliery representative walked anxiously along the platform, looking intensely through the glass of every single carriage window, but he could not see John anywhere. Confused and assuming there had been a simple delay or a change of plans, the representative watched as the train left Widdrington and continued its final run to Allenmouth Station. Allenmouth was the final destination for this particular train route. Once the train arrived and all the remaining passengers had completely disembarked, a young railway porter named Thomas Charlton began his routine walk down the platform to inspect the empty carriages. He noticed an apparently empty compartment near the front of the train with its large window left wide open. He walked over intending to close it against the weather, but when he turned the handle and opened the carriage door, he stumbled upon one of the most gruesome, shocking, and horrific crime scenes in the entire history of Edwardian Britain. Streams of bright red blood were running heavily across the wooden floor of the compartment, soaking into the fabric of the rugs. Forced violently beneath the passenger seats lay the battered, lifeless body of a man. Beside the body, scattered carelessly on the floor, were a blood-stained hard hat and a broken pair of eyeglasses. Trembling with shock, Mr. Charlton immediately ran to summon the train guard and the station master, who both rushed to the scene and instantly contacted the local police. Police officers quickly arrived at Allenmouth Station and began a meticulous examination of the bloody compartment. They picked up the hat from the floor and discovered a small label stitched inside, bearing the name J. I. Nisbet and the residential address of 180 Heaton Road, Heaton. The entire carriage contained deeply disturbing, violent evidence of a desperate struggle for survival. Blood-stained finger marks were smeared heavily on the leather armrests, which the police investigators surmised had been left by someone using the seat for leverage while dragging a heavy, bleeding body down to the floor to hide it from view. Most importantly, the small, locked leather wage bag containing the 370 pounds of cash was completely missing. John Nisbet had been robbed and brutally executed inside a moving train. Following the discovery of the horrific crime, the police launched a massive manhunt for the primary suspect, John Alexander Dickman. Because of his mounting debts and gambling habits, investigators believed he had a clear motive to target the colliery cashier. He was quickly arrested, and despite a distinct lack of direct evidence, as the murder weapon and the stolen money were never recovered, the prosecution built a powerful case based on circumstantial details. Key witnesses swore they saw Dickman sharing the train compartment with John Nisbet on that fateful morning. After a sensational trial that gripped the entire nation, the jury took just 2.5 hours to find him guilty. On August 10, 1910, John Alexander Dickman was led to the gallows at Newcastle Prison and hanged, maintaining his absolute innocence until his very last breath. To this day, the case remains one of Britain's most enduring and heavily debated criminal mysteries. Did the justice system execute the true killer, or did a desperate, clever thief get away with the perfect railway murder, leaving an innocent man to pay the ultimate price? The true answer disappeared forever along those dark tracks. If you found this historical true crime investigation gripping, please press the like button and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into history's most fascinating mysteries. Thank you for watching.